Hello everyone, Evan&AudreyS here, and welcome to another installment of my Top 5 Best and Worst series. Yeah, I did say at the end of my Marvel Best and Worst video that I would not be doing this anymore. However, because my movie criticism series now has an award ceremony every summer after every season, it only makes sense that this series continues. So, what is the subject this time? Well, did you know that the DC Extended Universe is starting to slowly surpass the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Yeah, while Marvel is still relying heavily on silly jokes and very action-packed sequences all the time, the DC movies are starting to try a few new things. However, not all the DC movies pay off, and B, there were some good DC movies even in their old days. So, today I'm going to count down my picks for the top 5 best and worst DCEU films. But before we begin, here are some rules to keep in mind. Firstly, I will not be counting every DC-related movie in this countdown. I'll only be talking about the movies in the DC Extended Universe. So, in other words, the animated DC movies, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, or even the new Batman movie with Robert Pattinson as the main character, they won't count. Secondly, because there are 12 movies as of right now in the DCEU, and 5 times 2 is 10, and I'll be counting 10, 2 of those movies will be on neither list. They will not be mentioned at all. Lastly, I should make it super clear that these choices are based on my opinion only, and not my sister Audrey's. Okay? With that said, let's start us off. Let's begin this countdown. Here are my picks for the top 5 worst DCEU movies. Number 5. Justice League from 2017. This movie happened sometime after Superman's death at the hands of Doomsday. The supervillain Steppenwolf wants to get his hands on all 3 mother boxes so that he can use them to conquer Earth. It's up to Batman, Wonder Woman, Cyborg, The Flash, and Aquaman to try and stop Steppenwolf. But soon they will realize that only someone like Superman would be strong enough to take on this evil warlord. Many critics felt disappointed by Justice League and felt like too much was tampered with. You see, originally Zack Snyder was going to direct the film, but when his daughter ended up committing suicide, Snyder had to leave. So the people at Warner Brothers Studios selected Joss Whedon, the guy who directed the first Avengers movie, to replace him. They also gave the makers a very strict rule to keep the final product under exactly 2 hours long. With all this background in mind, you'd expect this to be one heck of a flattened mess. And boy would you be right. Because a lot of necessary information from Snyder's original version was cut from the film, not only is the film often very confusing, but some of the more emotional scenes fall completely flat. So, why is this movie at the very bottom of the worst list? Well, there's one aspect of the film that brought some engaging conflict, and that is the debate on whether the team should revive Superman. Would that cause destruction to civilization? Is that even worth it? I honestly think that makes way more sense than what Zack Snyder's take did, which they just had our heroes all act agreeably on this idea. No stepping back, no questioning, it's time to revive a demigod. More importantly though, Justice League simply just didn't disappoint me as much as the movies higher on this list did, but it's still inferior to Zack Snyder's cut. Number 4. The Suicide Squad. After the original Task Force-esque is entirely wiped out during a mission on the island Cartel Maltese, intelligence officer Amanda Waller assembles a new Task Force X and assigns them to go to the Nazi factory Jotunheim and erase all evidence of the Project Starfish from it. This new team consists of a mercenary called Bloodsport, a jingoistic killer called the Peacemaker, their leader Colonel Rick Flag, Harley Quinn, a rat-summoning thief called Ratcatcher, and a shark-human hybrid called Nunnar. Sorry if I pronounced any of those names wrong. But soon, when the team gets inside Jotunheim, they discover a shocking truth about the project. Guys, I'm really sorry, but I simply can't get that much into this movie. To make things more shocking, I actually think this is worse than the Suicide Squad from 2016. Okay, just calm down. Let me explain why this is, okay? Please. So, the problem with the Suicide Squad is that it's far more focused on showing a lot of gory violence and people's heads getting ripped off than actually developing the characters and crafting a good story. Yeah, we do get the backstory needed for our characters' growth, but unlike with 2016's Suicide Squad, these moments come right out of nowhere, and most of them don't really pay off by the film's conclusion. The ones that do come back by the end feel really unearned and kinda silly. Now, I'm aware that director James Gunn wanted to do a much grittier version of Guardians of the Galaxy, but here's the problem with that. The extremely harsh violence and loads of scenes of characters yelling at each other actually takes away from the team's chemistry. Now, yes, the Guardians of the Galaxy themselves bicker often, but you could see a bond within them. I'm sorry, but going all out with the violence and harshness just simply doesn't work for these kinds of ensemble cast stories. A little more restrained and holding back could have helped. As is, the Suicide Squad is kind of a downgrade of what came before it, and it's clear that the filmmakers at DC Studios are ashamed of the 2016 Suicide Squad, disregarding everything that made it pay off by the end. Number 3. Black Adam. 5,000 years ago, the tyrannical king of Kahndaq, Ankh, created the crown of Sabak, which can give its wielder ultimate power. After years of his oppression, an enslaved boy gains the power of Shazam and starts a revolt against the evil Ankh. Eventually, the boy, now known as Teth Adam, grows up and confronts the king. However, after a quick struggle, Teth Adam ends up destroying the entire kingdom of Kahndaq. 50 centuries later, archaeologist Adriana Tomaz is searching for the crown of Sabak in order to try and put a permanent end to the regime that Ankh started. Soon, Teth Adam is suddenly revived after Tomaz summons him using a one-word spell. Now the newly restored Black Adam, Tomaz, her son Eamon, and the Justice Society of America must try and find the crown of Sabak before the terrorist organization Intergang, led by Ishmael Gregor, can. But there is some conflict between the JSA and Black Adam, because JSA doesn't believe Adam deserves to be given the chance to be a hero. Now, I already did a review of the movie on Movie Criticism, so check that video out for my thoughts in more detail. As for right now, I will say that my biggest issue with Black Adam is Black Adam himself. He's just far too serious and stern as a main character. There's no personality or humor in him. Now, I know the character is supposed to act this way, but that doesn't mean he can't have some charisma. His performer Dwayne Johnson tries his best to bring him to life. However, even this charismatic actor can't save Black Adam. But Black Adam isn't the only character I did not care for. In fact, I don't think I even cared for anyone. The only sort of likable character in Black Adam is Adriana Tomaz, but even she isn't too interesting either. Overall, Black Adam just might be one of the most mediocre of the DCEU movies. Not awful, just not that great or memorable. Number 2. Wonder Woman 1984. Set during the Cold War, Wonder Woman, aka Diana Prince, is still living a superhero career, but is also grieving her deceased lover, World War I pilot Steve Trevor. Soon, she meets both a geologist named Barbara and a sleazy oil baron called Maxwell Lord. Barbara is super insecure and envious of Diana's perfections, while Maxwell is struggling to save his oil company. One day, Maxwell stumbles upon a mysterious stone known as the Dreamstone. This artifact has the ability to grant anyone who touches it a wish. But, in return, the wisher would lose something that defines them. Maxwell wishes to actually become the Dreamstone, and is now granting lots of people wishes in order to gain wealth and power. Meanwhile, Diana herself wishes for Steve Trevor back, and suddenly, he is revived in a random man's body. But when Diana finds out about Maxwell's plans, she has to go and convince everyone to renounce all their wishes in order to save Earth from utter destruction. Wonder Woman 1984 is pretty much often a callback to the 1980s, a period filled with a lot of campiness and flamboyance. Sure, this can often make the film very lively to watch, but it can also sometimes hurt some of the moments that are meant to be a little more dramatic. This is most notable in the movie's climax, where Maxwell Lord is way too loud and hammy, to the point where he almost turns into the Green Goblin or a villain played by Jim Carrey.
Poor Diana! Dead. Why be such a hero? You could have kept your planet and your powers if only you'd joined me. Would reconsider? I'm a forgiving man. You want him back? Just say the word. You can have it all. You just have to want it.
While watching Wonder Woman 84, I just kept thinking, you know what? A lot of these emotional scenes would be much more impactful if they had more subtlety and nuance. There is also a lot of plot holes in the story, most of them revolving around the Dreamstone's rules and lore. For instance, why didn't Maxwell Lord just simply wish for his life and career to be fixed, instead of becoming the stone? What exactly would he gain from getting all these people their wishes? Also, at the end, when Maxwell renounces his wish, wouldn't that undo everyone else's wishes as well? Why do they need to speak up too? It's plot holes like these that kind of take me out of the story and make things more convoluted. But I think my big issue with Wonder Woman 84 is the execution of its message. You see, in the movie's prologue, a young Wonder Woman is competing in a game with her original civilization. But when she loses her horse at one point, she decides to cleverly take a shortcut past her competition. She almost wins until she is caught and scolded for cheating. Then, during the main story, people across the globe start making their own selfish wishes, refusing to look past the Dreamstone's lies. The film seems to be teaching that the truth and being honest is better than deception. Yes, for the most part, this is the case. However, the problem is that young Diana's situation is vastly different to what was happening in the main story. The people of the world in the present were making wishes out of their own selfish ambitions, while Diana was simply taking advantage of her available options during a game. I wouldn't really call young Diana's actions true cheating. I would call it trying a clever new approach to the game. I know what the film was going for, but young Diana's dilemma and its execution is a rather poor example of showing deception. I mean, in real life, when people play sports, they use their brains and try different things all the time, and they rarely get called out on for this. So, what is the problem with young Diana trying something new and clever, huh? You know, I would actually buy into this message if the movie portrayed young Diana as more lazy and not very passionate about the sport. But no, she's clearly putting a lot of effort into her performance. Anyway, Wonder Woman 1984 is not only inferior to the first movie, but it is also quite patronizing to the audience and clearly misunderstands what true deception is. Number 1. Man of Steel. This origin story for Superman has Clark Kent taking on evil General Zod as he tries to colonize Earth for the Kryptonite people. He also struggles between his biological or adopted heritage. That's right, the very first movie in the DCEU is my number 1 pick for this worst list. Now, just to be clear, I gave Man of Steel a C- grade, which isn't that bad of a grade. However, it's still a poor score. Out of every DCEU movie, I found Man of Steel to be the most boring and confusing. Some critics actually praised the movie for jumping right into Superman being an adult. But personally, I think that this non-linear style of editing makes the first act of the film hard to follow. What's worse is that I didn't really care if Superman defeated General Zod. Sure, the film does a decent job of developing their rivalry, but the film's poor and boring pacing and super long finale makes it difficult to really care by the end. Overall, while the MCU started out with a bang with the first Iron Man movie, the DCEU did quite the opposite with this movie. This is a huge reason why this is the weakest effort from the DCEU to me. So, those are my picks for the top 5 worst DCEU movies. Next week, I'll be going a little more optimistic and going over my top 5 best DCEU movies. But until then, I'm Evan J. Sims, signing out. Peace!